It's time for Black and White, a show that wants to bring all of us together talking again. It's time to hear from people who only want to deal with facts. It's time for you to re-engage in America. It's time for Dan and Daryl. Welcome back. This is Dan Perkins with Black and White, and one of my favorite guests who's running for Congress to try and make a change in the 3rd District. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Heidi St. John's. She's been on the show a couple of times and she's a honored guest. Welcome back, dear lady.
Hey, thank you, Dan, for having me. It's always great to be here.
My pleasure. As you travel around your circuit trying to win the nomination in your district to go against the incumbent Republican, what is the number one issue that you're hearing from the people at the stops that you make?
It's COVID. It's the mandates. It's people just scratch their heads trying to figure out how they got fired from their job that they have been excelling at and doing well at for 30 plus years. And all of a sudden the federal government can snap its fingers and they're no longer employed and their pension is gone. You know, I think that people are discouraged. They're frustrated. The suicide rate here in the Pacific Northwest is skyrocketing. People are starting to lose hope. And everywhere I go, I have been telling people, don't give up, don't lose hope. There are people that are fighting for this and fighting for the rule of law to win in the end, because what's happening is unconstitutional, right? And the Republicans certainly see that. And actually, the mood on the ground here in Washington is changing. I was at an event the other day and I met a guy who said he'd heard about my candidacy from his next door neighbor who has an entire life been a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat. And he has my sign in his front yard. I think the Democrats even are tired of this overreach by government. And the question becomes, what is the proper role of the federal government? And I would submit that they're wildly outside of their jurisdiction right now. And we need to send people to Congress and to the Senate to right the ship and say, absolutely not. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. You know, you're watching constitutional overreach now. You've got Roe v. Wade right at the Supreme Court. They're deciding, is this the role of the federal government to make this decision on behalf of the states? I think no, it's not that. It's not their role. And I think Roe v. Wade has a really good chance of being kicked back to the states right now. So I think the people are waking up. And I think if there's a silver lining of COVID-19, as you know, I lost my father to the illness. I think if there's a silver lining, it's that it's waking people up to say, wait a minute, is this how we want to be, as citizens of the United States, and bringing back into focus the responsibility that we have for civic engagement, to understand the law, to be able to defend the Constitution, to know how this country was founded and how it is supposed to run. And anyone who knows their history and understands the Constitution can see that the Biden administration and all of these mandates, the federal he's losing in court. Every time he tries to go to court, he's losing. And so we saw this happen in the 5th Circuit, then they kicked it to the 6th Circuit. He's going to continue to lose as long as his cases are put in front of judges who respect the Constitution in the United States. So those are the big issues right now. We are at a crisis point in our nation right now. I really believe it. We're at a crossroad, and we're either going to go socialist or we're going to go back to a constitutional republic, which is what our founding fathers gave us. And that's part of the reason I'm running for Congress.
So if we step back for a second and we try and unpack all the things that you said, let me suggest to you that while I agree with you that the issue is COVID, that perhaps we need to look at it in 2 pieces. Mm-hmm. The one piece is the overreach through the mandates of telling the state and local governments they have to terminate people if they can't get the vaccination or don't get them, and also the private sector. That's one set of issues. The other set of issues is what's going on in the way they're trying to treat us medically appropriate, and that's a separate issue than the invasion of our personal rights and our loss of job. And you know, I was listening today, and there's somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 members of the military who have said they're not going to get the shots.
Yep.
Now, even though President Biden says that he wants this mandate to go into effect January 4th, and the courts are saying, no, it's not going to go then. Again, as we talked in the pre-show, when he said, when they lost in the Supreme Court on housing, and the rent deferments, they said to the court, basically go pound sand, so we're doing it anyway. I suspect that that's likely what's going to happen on January the 4th. The courts are still going to rule that it doesn't, and it won't make it to the Supreme Court by January the 4th. But he's going to say you're going to do it anyway. He's becoming a dictator. Mm-hmm. So there really are two different issues. You unfortunately lost your father after he had received all 3 shots, mm-hmm. which is a bigger and increasing problem, and that is that people who are supposedly have the shots and are supposed to get milder cases, we're seeing more and more of the cases that are coming into hospitals are by people who have had the shots, and mm-hmm. it continues to accelerate. But mm-hmm. the issue really, the other issue, which is, does the federal government have the right to make a mandate on our health care, is a really totally different issue than medically should we get the shots. Mm-hmm. Are your constituents, are they splitting the two, or are they lumping them into one?
I don't think they're conflating the two anymore. I think that we did at the beginning, because we really thought, a lot of people thought when this thing first came out in 2020, oh my goodness, people are going to be dropping dead in the streets, our morgues are going to be overfilled. People were afraid. And because they were afraid, and we've learned a very valuable lesson now, it's very easy to scare people and very hard to unscare them. And when you are scared, you make decisions that are not rational. And so we decided, in our state of being afraid, that it was okay for the government to tell us, for example, who was essential and who wasn't. We should never have allowed that to happen. The government does not have the authority to put us into a never-ending state of emergency, and under this so-called emergency, determine who's essential and who isn't, who can have a job and who can't have a job. And now here we are almost 2 years later. And the people that were heroes working, or these people they said were heroes working in our hospitals, are now losing their jobs because they don't want to have an injection against their will. And so we're starting to see you absolutely nailed it. We're starting to see the tyrannical side of the Democrat Party. These are people who do not care for the rule of law. They're not interested in the Constitution. They don't care about the proper role of government and what is the jurisdiction of the federal government. They see an opportunity, and you see the Democrats are very good at this. Never let a crisis go to waste. And so they're using it to garner control. And I actually think that at the end of the day, that's what this is about for the Democrats. It is about control. It is about making sure the people know that they are plebs in the system. The Democrats, and especially the socialists, you see this with AOC, these people are hypocrites from sunup to sundown, and they're not interested in freedom. And this country was based on freedom. It was founded on freedom, individual freedom. And so these are freedom issues. And I think here in Washington State, the more I travel and the more I talk to people, they understand. The average voter is smart. They get it. They're starting to go, as they're coming out of their fear fog, right? I call it the fear fog. When you can come out of the fear fog and you start looking to see what is the net result of all of these mandates. I always told my children, Dan, I told you I have 7 children and 4 grandchildren. And I always told them, if the fruit is rotten, look at the root. You got to get to the root. And that is what we need to do now. We can start doing a little bit of an autopsy on what is happening to our country right now. And the root is rotten because the root is not honoring liberty any longer. And so we're not even allowed, you get on and you question the narrative of the mainstream media when it comes to COVID, and they slap a false information tag on you, or worse yet, they take you out the space altogether, or they put you in jail so they can teach you a lesson, a clear violation of the First Amendment. And we're watching our Constitution and our Bill of Rights literally being trampled on in the name of a virus with a 99.9% survival rate. This is wrong. And I think history is not going to judge this era very kindly. And the American people are looking for patriots, people who love this country and will stand for freedom and liberty, because we've got a crisis of leadership in this country. It's about 16,000 miles wide, this crisis of leadership, and it's created a vacuum that is literally hurting the American people. This is what is costing us lives. This is what is costing us jobs. It is a crisis in leadership. And I pray to God that people who love this country and stand for liberty will do what I'm doing and start running for positions of authority in this country. I've had enough. The Democrats are dangerous. And frankly, our government right now is filled with dangerous Democrats and weak Republicans who don't have the backbone, many of them, to stand up to this tyrannical leadership and the tyrannical style of government that the Biden administration has ushered in. It's a sad time for the United States.
I just finished, we got a couple minutes in this segment. I just finished, and I want to be upfront to your whole audience in total disclosure. I don't have any financial interest about what I'm going to say at the moment. I just happen to believe it's a wonderful read. I was fortunate enough a few weeks ago to have Peter Navarro on my show, who was the supply chain guy for the president. And he has a new book out called In Trump Time. I encourage everybody to read it or get an audiobook or an ebook, because I have to tell you, Heidi, having listened to the book, I have more admiration and respect for Donald Trump when I understand the magnitude of the power and the influence of the deep state.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of questions I had were answered in this book. So it's called Trump Time by Peter Navarro. Get it at bookstores. It's just a phenomenal read. But he talks about what you're talking about, the freedoms that are being taken away, and the bureaucracy and the that's going on in the United States, and it's been developing not just with Joe Biden, but it's been developing for some time, as Republicans have been relatively weak and allowed the Democrats to have control, even though they may not have been in control from a numbers standpoint. So when you go to your rallies and you're sitting with groups and talking to groups of people, COVID and the mandates, big issue. Anything about schools and critical race theory?
Yeah, I would say it changes, right, according to the headlines. But if you were to ask me what the top 3 issues were, I would say, and then I'm running on this, and before any of this stuff happened, I said schools, education is at the root. It is one of the foundational reasons I'm running, because the reason why we're seeing so much of this tyrannical government overreach and a lack of understanding about the Constitution and our freedom and the history of this great nation is a result of the indoctrination that is in our public schools. And because of COVID, we have had the curtain has been pulled back on what's happening in our public school system, be it critical race theory, comprehensive sex education, the 1619 Project, revisionist history, people trying to erase our history. We know that people who do not understand their history are destined to repeat it. Right. And we're sure going backwards pretty fast right now. And so, yeah, the schools are on fire. And I hope that what happened in Virginia happens here in Washington State and around the world. And I think parents are waking up right now. Honestly, we could send shockwaves to Washington, D.C. in 2022, and I hope to be a part of it.
Well, with that message, with that important message, will be
the vaccine companies tell us their products will be 95% effective. How do you know if you're in the 95 or the 5% group? Congressman Steve Lynch, who had the 2-shot regimen of a vaccine, just tested positive. You may not know which group you're in, but in either case, you need to have the strongest immune system possible. You need to get CV Acute for short-term protection and CV Defense for long-term support for a healthy immune system. Take charge of your health care. Go to empoweryourself.info to order these important supplements.
Back. We're speaking with Heidi St. John's, a friend of the program and somebody that we like for the 3rd District in the state of Washington. So let me ask you a question. We've talked about the mandate for the vaccinations, and we've talked a little bit about critical race theory. And I have to tell you, I happened to see an interview with AOC, and they were talking to her about what's going on in Washington at the Supreme Court with the Roe versus Wade. Mm-hmm. And she couldn't figure out whether a pregnant woman was a woman with child, or a menstruating person, or a birthing person. And she kept getting herself confused while she was talking. I don't understand this wokeness of agreeing that women are women and men are men. So
Mhm.
what is it an issue in your state, or is it down the road, down the line?
Well, I mean, definitely it's an issue here because people are talking about it, right? But I think the ordinary American understands that biology isn't bigotry, right? And so we're able to say with complete confidence and have the science back us up that there are not 400 genders, that men do not give birth, men do not have periods, men do not have babies. They do not. And what you see in AOC is an example of cultural Marxism. They're trying to create absolute chaos in the country. The end of that, of course, is divide us. This is identity politics to its finest, right? So if they can divide us into gender, maybe they can divide us by people who think that they're a particular gender. It's just degrees of separation and degrees of division. And the fact that AOC, you know what, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a fool because she knows the truth. She knows that there is only male and female. And what she's trying to do is please the woke part of her base by trying to make sure she gets all the ever-changing lingo right. And the minute she thinks she gets it right, they're going to change it on her again. So good luck to AOC for that. I stand with science. I'm going to defend science on this one. I think it's amazing that we're talking about whether or not men can have babies. I'm sorry, but I have had 7 babies myself. Personally, I have delivered 7 little human beings into this world, and I am not a birthing person. I am a mother. And I worked hard for that, for the title of mother. And I think any woman who's ever given birth, or frankly, any woman who's adopted a child and has earned the title of mother, to see these people come in and try to strip it away from them and give it to a man is disgusting. It's disgusting. And I'm not going to sit by and watch while Nancy Pelosi and the likes of these crazy people on the floor of the House of Representatives try and strip male and female from the language. It's ridiculous. And I actually think it's going to turn around and knock them on their rear ends in 2022. At least that's what I'm hoping it's going to do.
So one of the observations I would make, starting with Virginia and New Jersey, and even in Minnesota, where they overturned the ban the police, rebuild the police. I believe there's a new constituency that's been developed, and we're seeing it across the country. We used to think of issues in terms of political parties. We're just talking about AOC and the Democratic Party and the woke. But what I see as I listen to all of those men and women, but primarily women who were challenging the school boards all over the country, is that there's a new coalition. It's why we are creating a new show called Moms Across America, which is now in its 3rd week. And what we're seeing is that moms is a higher calling than Democrat, Republican, or Independent, because we're seeing Democratic women, Republican women, and Independent women coming around the idea of the education for their children. And that focus is apolitical, because their children are something that's important regardless of their political persuasion. And I think that has the potential, if the Republicans can get on board and march to that drum, they will pick up Democratic women and Independent women. What do you think?
Oh yeah, I think this issue crosses party lines. I think again, it goes back to what we were talking about in the first segment, is a question of jurisdiction. Does the federal government have the right to dictate to parents the upbringing of their children? And the answer is no, they do not have that right. Does the Department of Justice have the right to spy on parents because they have participated in school board meetings and went against the politically correct narrative? No, they don't have that right. And what you're seeing happen is these mama bears. I mean, it's part of the reason I'm running for Congress. Get your hands off my cubs. Get away from my family. You have overstepped your bounds. And that's what's happening. And the public school system, I hate to say this, is broken in 1,000 different ways right now. And I know that there are good people, good men and women who are doing the very best they can to fight this inside the school system, right? Good teachers, there are good administrators, but they are literally being hogtied by an ideological revolution that has been happening in our schools for decades. And now these people have infiltrated the schools to where I don't think we're ever going to be able to get them out again, which is why I keep telling parents, pull your children out of government school. If these schools are receiving government money, chances are very, very good that they are indoctrinating your children. This is why we're seeing math scores and science and reading scores plummet across the nation, because we're not focusing on reading, writing, and arithmetic. These kids are graduating from high school and they've got a 5th grade reading level, or they can't write an essay that would get them into college. But boy, are they schooled in wokeness. Boy, they can tell you about how many genders there are and what they identify as that day and what hurts their feelings. We're really good at that, but we are going to hurt this country. These are tomorrow's judges and tomorrow's lawmakers and tomorrow's teachers and tomorrow's administrators. And we are literally indoctrinating them. And I would like to see us get back to American ingenuity, American exceptionalism, American greatness. That starts by educating our children and giving them a fighting chance on the world stage. And so I'm a huge believer in alternative forms of education. I think homeschooling is up to 50% right now. And I've been telling parents, listen, your worst day of homeschooling your children is going to be better than their best day in this public indoctrination center known as the government school system.
How's that message getting over?
Oh, it's being received really well because people are seeing it now. I just read a headline the other day that the Chicago school system is labeling their bathrooms girls plus and boys plus, meaning any person for any reason with any excuse and any mental issue can use whatever bathroom they want to. You tell me what's going to happen, Dan. We're going to start to see rape skyrocket. We're going to see unwanted pregnancies. We're going to start to hear stories of horrifying stories of things that are happening to our children under the watch of these woke adults. Shame on these people. They know this is wrong. They're hurting our children, and it's time to see them called to account.
We had an example in Virginia where a young man decided he identified as a girl, went into the girl's bathroom in a skirt and raped a girl. And the solution for the school board was moving to another school, which he did it again.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that didn't go well at all with a lot of people. You know, it's interesting, like when you talked about your protecting your cubs. If we start taking children out of the public school, what's going to happen to the public school as we know it?
Well, I think they're going to start to lose funding as well. They should. Get back to what you were supposed to be doing, which is teaching our children reading, writing, and arithmetic, the history of this nation. But what we've done is we've politicized our schools. And I think what's going to happen is I think the same thing will happen in healthcare. I don't know about you, but I don't trust the healthcare industry anymore. I don't trust the CDC. I don't trust these people. I think when this is all over, you're going to see two things bubble to the surface: greed and hubris. And I think we're going to hear stories about this for generations to come. And the same thing is happening in our schools. And right now there is a handful of warriors, myself included, that are willing to stand up and take the bullets from the radical left and stand up against all this insanity and the lies and what's coming out of our schools and say enough is enough is enough. And I don't think we've got any time to lose. We have no time to waste. Socialists don't sleep. And so when the Republicans were in power last, you'll remember this, Dan, right? We had the House and the Senate, and we had the executive branch. And what did we do with what we were given? Nothing. We squandered it. We had dinner parties and talked about how amazing it was. And wow, look at us, we're in power. Well, the whole time that we were doing that, they were figuring out how they were going to take the country over. And the fact of the matter is, we have got right now in this country, the building blocks for the hostile takeover of this nation are already in place. The radical left owns our education system. They own our grade schools and our high schools and our universities. They own the major media outlets. They own Big Pharma. They own the hospitals. And they're using a virus with a 99.9% survival rate to implement all of this radical new world order agenda that they've been talking about and dreaming about and salivating over for generations. And it's going to take warriors to take it back. People who are willing to tell the truth and stand up in the face of this ridiculous, really, when I listen to AOC talk, I'm just cringing. I can't even believe it. This is an elected representative saying she's not even sure if there's male or female. We have entered some sort of, Orwellian rabbit hole in this country. And it's going to take people of conscience and character to start leading the way out of this abyss and into a new dawn for America. And I believe it can happen. Hope springs eternal in Heidi St. John for this amazing nation, because I actually think that there are more of us than there are of them. It's just that somehow we have allowed them to take over leadership of this country, and it needs to stop, and it needs to stop in 2022. And frankly, I'm looking forward to it.
You know, that last statement leads us to our last question. Is what you're trying to do as far as changing the country a fad or a movement?
It's a movement. It is absolutely a movement. We have been watching it, as I'm sure you have. I have been watching right here in my home area of Clark County, Washington. I've spent the last 17 years raising my children here. My grandchildren are being raised here. And I have watched us sliding backwards into socialism now for many, many years. But I have been focused on raising my children. And I want to see this country move forward. And I think you're going to see a movement like what you saw in Virginia. I think you're going to see it spread like wildfire all over this country, because the patriots, the people who love this country, the honest working men and women of this country, who really the country was built on working men and women who wanted to hold a good job and take their kids to church on Sundays and build a good life for their children and for their families. These people are realizing, oh my goodness, the people that we have been electing to represent us have not been representing us. And in fact, not only are they not representing us and not fighting for freedom and not fighting to keep our taxes lower and our borders safe and our children safe, they're actually fighting against us. And I think the anger on the ground that you are feeling and seeing on the news is going to come to bear in 2022. And I hope we can keep it going, because we're going to have to get off of the bench and onto the battlefield. And now is the time. Now is the time.
One of the things that a football coach, whether he's grade school, high school, college, or professional, has to be concerned about is that when he puts his team together and they start to come together, he doesn't want them to peak too soon. And we have just about a year before the midterm election, 2 years till the general election. Are these issues that we've talked about today going to peak before, or is there enough momentum to carry them all the way through into 2024?
I think there's enough momentum, and I'll tell you why. I've been speaking on these issues for probably 15 years, trying to sound the alarm, particularly about what's happening in our schools. I think the lawsuits have only just begun to come into the courts. Angry Americans who have lost their jobs and their livelihoods and their pensions and their futures, people who are losing their houses, whose marriages are imploding. I think we're only just beginning to see this thing start to build. And as far as the schools go, we're only just beginning to hear the stories of what's happening to our children because of these bathroom mandates that we can thank Barack Obama for starting, right? And I think people are telling the truth now about comprehensive sex education, about critical race theory, this idea that was birthed in our universities in 1989 that is nothing but racist garbage. And I think the more people, I'm going to keep talking about it, because there are still people who don't understand. There are still people who are not aware of what's happening in the schools. And the more we talk about it and the more this stuff gets out in the news, the more parents are getting involved, and grandparents and single people going, no, this isn't right. This is not what, this isn't what this country was founded on. And this isn't what we want for our future. And so I don't think it's going to peak anytime soon. I think it's the beginning of a movement that's going to go on for many, many years. And we need it, because it's going to take many, many years to pull this country out of the black hole that the Democrats have pushed it into. Yeah. Have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Thanks for joining us today on Black and White. If you missed any of this terrific interview, you can hear it and many more by going to blacksandwhites.us. Click on the archive section. Keep yourself well informed. Come back soon. If you are interested in reaching our vast Black and White Network audience with your products or services, then contact Hollis Media Group at 1-855-673-8635. That's 1-855-673-8635 for more information on this great opportunity.